So is Atlanta still affordable, or is it all hype? Today we're going to look at statistics for everything: buying, renting, utilities, childcare, and so much more. Let's get into it. So when I started my YouTube channel at the beginning of 2020, one of the first types of videos I would make were budget videos. What can you get Atlanta for X dollar amount? And some of the first ones I did were, what can you buy in Atlanta for under $150,000? And believe it or not, there are a lot of good options. We're nearly 5 years later, and there's almost nothing you can buy in the perimeter for $150,000 or less. In fact, between 2020 and today, the median sales price for a home went from $262,000 to $425,000. So the question is Atlanta still affordable? Believe it or not, it is. Let's dive into some statistics. You know, a lot of viewers are surprised when I tell them that most of my clients find me on YouTube. But it's true, you can actually work directly with me to find the perfect home in the perfect neighborhood for you and your family. And most of our clients are moving here from another state, just like you, so we know exactly what to do to help. Go ahead and book a Zoom call with me using the link in the description below, or shoot me an email at info@livinginatlanta.com. We love when our viewers become clients. So let's take a look at this chart from the Council for Community and Economic Research. So here we have a list of the 25 most populous metros and their associated cost of living index. So you can see from the chart, Atlanta is 18th on this list of the 25 most populous metros for cost of living index. However, when looking at this, we need to consider that Atlanta is actually the 6th most populous metro. So in relation to how populous Metro Atlanta is, the affordability here is much better than many of the other most populous areas. Now let's take a look at income equivalency. How much would you need to earn in another location to match a $50,000 salary in Atlanta, Georgia? Now again, you can see there are 17 other metros where you're going to need to earn more money to earn the equivalent of $50,000 in Atlanta. And for the top 5, 6, 7 options, much more. Additionally, the grouping around $50,000 is very similar for the middle and bottom of this pack. So what these two charts tell me is that among the most populous metros, even though Atlanta is number 6 among 25, you're going to have some of the best cost of living index, and your dollar is going to go further, even more so than much less populated metros. Now let's take a deeper look at housing affordability straight from the MLS statistics. So I have InfoSparks pulled up here, which is data coming straight from our local MLS, and we're looking at the greater Atlanta area, which for our purposes essentially means Metro Atlanta. First, let's look at the median sales price, and you can see we're tracking all the way back to 2011. This chart really says a lot. I mean, if you look just 12 years ago, we bottomed out at $100,000 median for Metro Atlanta. And as of March 2024, we now have a median sales price of $425,000. So you can really see the growth of Metro Atlanta represented here over the last 12, 13 years. Now let's take a quick look at days on market so we can understand the real estate market here a little better. So again, days on market, median. So March of 2024, 15. You can see obviously from this chart, this is cyclical. It's going to be lower in the spring, summer market, a little bit higher in the winter. But what you can also see from this chart going back to 2011 is our issues with supply. So we see going back 12, 13 years as demand for homes in Atlanta increased and a lot of people started moving here. Our supply went down, which did a few things. Obviously drove up prices, but also drove down average days on market. And you can see when this rock bottomed here in 21, median days on market 5 days, which is astonishingly low. And this just represents the supply demand issue. Not enough supply to keep up with all of the demand and how Atlanta has grown over the last 12, 13 years. We can also see this represented with months supply. And this is basically representing, if you put every home in Metro Atlanta on the market today, how long would it take to sell that home? How long would it take to close it? You can see the story of Atlanta here as well. So The supply goes down, down, down as demand increases. If you're looking at 2011, that's shocking. 9.8 months it would take if you listed every home on the market in March 2011. May 2021, 1 month. Now, if that doesn't seem shocking to you, what that means, because typically it's 30 days to close. So what this is saying is, as soon as you put all the homes on the market, they would go under contract, you would close them all within a month. Now, this is great for sellers, but 2021 was a very stressful time for buyers. And you can see this tick up a little bit. I would associate this mostly with higher interest rates. So although higher interest rates are reducing your buyer power, trust me, it's a more balanced market and a better environment for everyone. Because as soon as those rates come down significantly, lower than 5, I would say, your prices are going to shoot up, the market is going to get crazy, and buying a home is going to be very stressful. So we can really see the story of Metro Atlanta over the last 13 years in this chart. Demand increased for a lot of different reasons, all of which I talk about consistently on this channel, and supply never really caught up. And we're still dealing with that. We have not built enough supply to keep up with growing demand. And until we can really get out in front of that, unfortunately, we're going to have a strong seller's market where buyers are still at a little bit of a disadvantage. Now, let's pause the statistics here to just talk normally. I want to give you a really good understanding of what kind of budget you need in the Atlanta area to buy and to rent. So let's focus on starter budgets, because obviously your budget can go well up into the millions, and especially in Atlanta, you're just going to have your pick of the litter. So obviously the higher your budget, the more options you have, but what is that base level that you need to move into a comfortable home in Atlanta that's not going to be a money pit? So let's start off ITP. Inside the perimeter, you want to be pretty much in the city. Now again, this is going to vary quite a bit depending on how much space you need, and also if you're open to an attached option versus a detached single family home. If you want to be inside the perimeter and you're okay living in an attached option like a condo or townhome, I think a good starter budget is $250,000. And yes, if you only need a studio, you can get by on even less, but to me that's a budget that would get you probably at least 2 beds in a nice looking building with good amenities, and also in very good areas. One thing that's not talked about enough is that if you're okay with attached options, you can be in the heart of Buckhead, of Midtown, and you don't have to break the bank. Of course, you do want to keep in mind the monthly HOA, factor that into your payment, because in Midtown and Buckhead, those HOAs can get pretty high per month. Now, if you need a single family detached home inside the perimeter, I think you need a starting budget of $375,000. Now again, this is very relative. If you only need a 2-bed home, you're going to have way more options. I'm going based off of you need a 3-2, at least 1,200 square feet, and you want it to be move-in ready, and you don't want it to be a money pit. Now, of course, this is the starter budget, so you're going to be looking in up-and-coming areas, either on the west side or maybe the east side or south side. Unfortunately, you're going to have very few options for those popular inner-city core neighborhoods and the more popular ones to the north. But let's cover OTP, right? You want to live in the suburbs, and for these purposes, we'll assume you want to be a reasonable commute to the city of Atlanta. Now, the big differentiating factor for me here is how good do you need the public schools to be? If you don't have kids or your kids are not school age, you're going to have way more options. Because of where the good public schools are, you get a lot of desire and interest focused on the north side of town. So if you do want to be in the suburbs to the north of Atlanta, because they have good schools and good amenities and good proximity to the city, I'd say at this point you need a starting budget of $450,000. Now again, you can definitely get by on something a little bit less, but it's going to be less updated and smaller. Now, if you're just not concerned with the quality of the public schools, you're very open to the area that you can be, and especially if you're okay with being further away from the city, I definitely think you can do well on a starter budget of $350,000. That can definitely get you something move-in ready with a pretty easy commute into town. And I'm not talking about really dangerous areas, right? Just assume that for all these examples, these are areas where most people would feel comfortable and safe. So that is just broad strokes for buying, but some of you are renters and you want to know, how good is my budget going to do while I rent here? So again, this is going to depend quite a bit, because if you're a student and you only need a room, you could probably get by on $500 or $600 a month in many nice areas. But let's say you want your own space, you want to rent at least a 1-1 apartment. I would put a starting budget here at about $1,300. The good news here is that all the areas we're talking about with renting are going to be good areas. Probably more so than if you need to buy, especially a detached option. Now, if you're looking for a 2-bed, 2-bath place to rent, I'm going to say you want a budget of at least $1,800. And if you're looking for a 3-2 or more in a nice building in a good part of town, I think you're going to need a budget of at least $2,300. But what if you want to rent an entire house? And a lot of people from other metros are surprised that you can do this. And it's true, more so than many other cities, there are a lot of options to rent an entire single family detached home at a price that won't break the bank. So of course, this is going to be highly variable to the area and size of the home. But if you have a budget between $1,500 to $3,000, you should have some solid options for renting an entire house. For a quick example, a $1,500 budget could get you maybe a 3-2 ranch on the far east side, right around $285. It gets much less dense over here, so I think there's plenty of safe subdivisions. You have an entire house and probably a pretty big yard at that price. But let's say you want to be much further in town. You want to be in one of the more popular neighborhoods, closer to the core of the city or further north. I would say that's where your budget's going to go into the high 2,000s to low 3,000s. And this tracks pretty much identically for outside of the perimeter, OTP as well. Generally speaking, at a budget of $3,300 a month or more, you really are going to have your pick of the litter in terms of where you want to be, and there's a good chance you can rent out an entire house on your own. All right, let's look at some more statistics, more so to do with day-to-day living. And my resource for this is called Numbeo. This is a nice little tool. Now, not all of the information is totally accurate, I would say, but what it's good for in particular is comparison. If you're trying to decide between two cities in the Southeast and you're really concerned about the price differences in living there, Numbeo could be a great way to quickly compare. So if we just take a look, I pulled up Charlotte, North Carolina versus Atlanta, Georgia. I don't want to spend too much time here, but we're just going to touch on some quick items. So you can see this goes through everything, which is really interesting, starting with restaurants, which for Atlanta, it says meal, inexpensive restaurant, one person, $23. Meal for two people, mid-range, 3-course, $100. I would say that's fairly accurate. The mid-range restaurant, I guess mid-range could mean a lot of different things. For a 3-course, $100 including tip, yeah, I'd say that's fairly accurate. To be honest, it's tough to go out on a date of any kind without dropping at least $50, even in casual places, but we're all feeling the effects of inflation. So looking at these, obviously the differences are going to be more stark depending on how far the location is. So an area like Charlotte isn't going to be too dissimilar, but if you're comparing a Seattle, this is where you're really going to notice the difference. So this goes through, grocery items as well. If you want to catch up on some of our local costs, most of this is crowdsourced, so it's probably the most accurate piece on this list. The transportation one is definitely one to look at because we can see that, a one-way MARTA ticket in Atlanta is $250 and that equivalent in Charlotte is $225. You can also see the monthly pass cost, which is super relevant, and also what gas is trending out right now. The utilities one, now this is a little high to me because it's saying for a 915 square foot apartment. Honestly, first thing, for a 915 square foot apartment, a lot of times for the smaller unit apartments, some of your utilities, if not all of them, are going to be included. But that's highly variable to the landlord. But let's just talk about, we're talking about utilities. Let's just talk about a 3-2 house that's, say, 1,350 square feet. You're renting it or you're owning it. And let's say it's got electric, gas, and water. So your garbage and waste is going to be tied into your mortgage typically. So I don't factor that in. Will depend exactly where we're talking about. And this is going to cycle between summer and winter, right? So gas bills go up in the winter time. Electric AC bills go up way higher in the summertime. But for me, on average, gas, electric, and water is going to typically be under $200. I'd say my water bill can be anywhere from $25 to $70 on a bad month. And the power and the gas are going to alternate depending on the time of year, like I said. So during the summertime, when I'm running it all the time, my electricity might be $125 and my gas might be $20. During the wintertime, my gas might go up above $100, but my electricity is going to be less because I am hardly ever running the AC. So hopefully that gives you a rough idea of what kind of utility costs you're looking at. Now there's also some good ones like childcare. One thing I will note is that many people who come here from other metros, particularly the more expensive ones, are really surprised at how many private school options we have at different prices. Now, if you want to pay $25,000 to $45,000 a year for private school, sure, there's a lot of options for you to do that. However, there are more options than many people realize at $9,000 a year, $9,000 to $15,000 a year, which again is still a big investment, but there are more private school options than many people realize at affordable prices. And this continues to go on for rent. These are a bit trumped up. If you want my opinion, I don't think these are super accurate, but this is a great tool just to compare mostly, I would say, groceries and restaurant expenses and transportation, and compare them to the other cities that you're considering. All right, so let's talk about property taxes. Now, this is one of the most complicated ones to talk about, and as a realtor, I'm always trying to find ways to explain this to people in a simple way so they have a good handle on it. But honestly, it's difficult to do because, as you can expect, it's going to completely depend on the area, the county, the city, the exact area we're talking about, and the cost of the home. So this is one of the best resources I've found, and I'll include a link in the description so that you can look it up. It's called trends.onwell.com, but they've done a total assessment of your average property tax costs in the Atlanta area. So one thing to note right off the bat, just generally speaking, your average property tax rate in Atlanta is going to be 1.22%. And it says the higher than the county average of 1.05%. So just quick and dirty calculation, this is what you should be expecting on average, 1.22% per year. And there's a lot of good information on here about property taxes, including the fact that the dead timeline is January 1st when the properties are assessed. Notices go out between April and July, and property owners have 30 to 40 days to pay their notices, and it's paid in arrears. You also have important links for different government organizations locally. You have important dates for valuation and assessment and when notices go out, and also what kind of exemptions are available. And not only that, but it has a interactive chart where you can zoom in on certain areas and see the average property tax bill. Guys, this is one of the best resources I've found. Anywhere you're looking around Metro Atlanta, we can just hover over and see the average property tax bill, the median property tax bill, and the number of property sales, which probably isn't as relevant for you. Now, you do want to keep in mind, don't get nervous. I mean, especially in the more expensive areas, on average, it's going to be higher, but if you have a more affordable home, it's probably not going to be as high. This also goes by zip code, and you can see what's the 10th percentile, what's the median, what's the 90th percentile for the zip code and the assessed values. So that's going to tell you about values, but if you keep going down, you can see the median property tax bill depending on zip code. This is fantastic information. So if you're comparing different zip codes, you can really quickly get a sense of what your median payment is going to be. You can also look at the effective property tax rate by zip code and all the percentiles. And this goes on to give more information about the average home value in Atlanta over time and the unique listings in Atlanta. But I think the best resource here is this map where you can see the median yearly cost. And then this property tax bill chart is fantastic. Focus on the median and look at the zip codes that you've been interested in. I live in 30315. Median is 2158. That sounds right on to what my property taxes are. So again, it's really difficult to give you a straight answer about what your property taxes are going to be in any given location. But this resource should really help you drill down depending on exactly where you're looking at and give you a great idea of what to expect. So there you have it. We looked at a lot of very interesting data. We've given you some great resources to dive deeper into this stuff on your own. Some final thoughts for you. Is Atlanta affordable? Yes, it is still affordable relatively. I would say for those of you who are coming from the more famous, expensive markets, the New York, Southern California, Pacific Northwest, lots of areas in the Northeast, you are really gonna feel how much more affordable the Atlanta area is. Now, in terms of pay, of course, your salary may look different taking a job in Atlanta versus one of those larger markets, but the housing costs and property taxes especially are gonna be a big relief for you. Now, if we're comparing to smaller, closer metros, say a Houston or Charlotte, it's going to depend on what we're comparing. Your dollar may technically go further in both of those cities. But again, keep in mind just how large Metro Atlanta is, how populous it is. And obviously that's not going to be a deciding factor for you, but it does play a role in a lot of different categories, like how home values are likely to increase over time, how much opportunity you may have in your career, and how many different types of experiences and amenities you can have available to you. Overall, I would say for the population and the size and the amazing amount of things there are to do in Atlanta, it is still pretty affordable. However, if you really want to be in one of the smaller cities in the Southeast, you're maybe less concerned with the economy and less concerned with diversity of things to do, then there are definitely more affordable options. And if the cost of housing is your #1 priority, then Atlanta may not be the best fit. But again, we are the 6th largest metro in the country. And the fact that you can still purchase a house under $400,000 and be practically in downtown Atlanta, or at least extremely close to some of the most popular neighborhoods here, shows that Atlanta still has a lot to offer when it comes to affordability. So I really hope you enjoyed that video. I hope it provided you some value, and I hope if you have any real estate needs in the Metro Atlanta area, you'll call my team to help you. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.